do you think Nigeria and indeed African countries can survive in an interdependent world?
I prefer to use the word complex interdependence.
Okay.
Complex in the sense that we argue that the world is interdependent, because countries must share something in common, and some must benefit more than others, even in a relationship that is interdependent. Okay, how do we survive in such an interdependent world? We have to get our priorities right. The picture might look grim, but if some countries are able to achieve it, then we can also achieve it. We must get our priorities right. It's not the same situation whereby today we sit down and agree that, okay, we want to do this, we want to do this, we want to do that, we want to focus on infrastructure development, we want to focus on industry, and the next minute we are fighting politically, and then we have everything forgotten at that level. Or one government starts, okay, erecting such a structure, a foundation, the next government comes, truncates it. There's no sense of continuity. There should be that sense of continuity. A semblance of what I'm even talking about is at least, no matter the challenges we have here within Lagos, you see some bit of build up on what previous governments have done, minimally, okay? At least people can identify with it. So the fact that one government starts something does not mean the other government should do away with whatever the other government has done. But there should be some form of incremental, in which case the broad vision of where we want to be should be collective. The broad vision of what African countries want to be, as they have defined also under the agenda, African Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. It should be something that all countries should be on, all hands should be on deck at the level of African countries. Leadership, mobilize their citizens to work collectively. We must pay attention to very critical needs of people. We must pay attention to very critical sectors that need, at least should receive attention almost immediately. We need to pay attention to education, technology. At least we should be able to adapt it to suit our own environment. Well, people always talk about, why technology do this. Well, the Chinese will always tell you, people don't dash you, don't give you the technology free of charge. You have to work at it. You have to build an indigenous version of it. In which case, like the Indians do, you buy 5 fighter jets outside, 3 in ready-made forms, 2 have to be assembled within, with the involvement of your own people, so that they can see what is done and replicate same. And I strongly believe that we don't totally lack the human and capacity to do it. We truly do. I think we are much more divided when it comes to the issue of putting the right people in the right place. Sometimes even after spending so much to train them, we neglect them. The story of Ajakuta Steel is one which could actually explain to a very large extent what I'm talking about. I want to believe that applies to a very large extent, to other African countries as well. Some of these stories have a lot of similarity. Few countries that are doing a bit well in recent times, post-genocide Rwanda is actually picking up. They are tired of what they actually went through, and they made up their mind to move forward, and indeed they are moving forward. South Africa, occasionally in and out, but at least we find out that there is also some level of understanding that, look, they need to push the embers of the level. When we say that, okay, we are far behind, it's not as if we have done nothing entirely. It's far from true. But at least when we do it, it's just in comparative terms. And then also looking inwards, there are some things you think that should just be a given, but they are not really a given. It's a whole lot of toil. I don't understand, for instance, a city like Lagos, that we know that the port is sited on one side and is a major pillar of the Nigerian economy, and you don't have a rail connecting the port to another part of the town, whereby you can quickly take most of these containers through train, avoiding the traffic grid we have there, and then also the problem on the road. Instead, I don't know what the vision is, what the thinking is, but that is also one of the examples of some of the misprioritization, or I think where we don't get it right. The health sector, we don't need to be always flying out for medical tourism. We could actually build our own capacity. Why do we undermine the health sector to the extent that doctors in their thousands are migrating. The same exam they say they fail here, they get it outside. The same health systems that they struggle to survive within here, they go outside, they survive with very little or no, very little effort outside. So these are some of the examples. Teachers, lecturers, etc. With little effort outside, they make it. When you come back home, this is a very funny situation. So we need to actually have minimum consensus of what we don't want to go below at the country level, at the continental level. And I want to believe that if African leaders key into the Agenda 2063, collectively work on it, that we could actually attain the level of development we want to achieve as a continent.
Okay. Africa is the second largest in the world after Asia, but seen from the economic angle, Africa is still very small. Indeed, there have been efforts at economic integration, but why has this integration been difficult to achieve?
Well, the continental project of integration is also contingent on the states we are talking about.
Okay.
I told someone about last week or so, I said, ECOWAS, the African Union, is as strong as the African states themselves. You understand my point? Because if we say they are weak, it also gives you an idea of the nature of membership that constitutes them. Okay, we come to the level of, for instance, production. What are we exchanging? Intra-African trade, intra-regional trade, or sub-regional trade, if we must put it that way, within the ECOWAS, for instance. Nigeria, for instance, within the ECOWAS is a major country with the highest population, the largest market, etc. Same, it even applies to Africa. We are still the largest in terms of population, human population, speaking. Well, economic-wise, we might not absolutely be. At some point in time, we are said to have overtaken, South Africa, but I'm not very sure where we actually stand now vis-a-vis other countries in Africa. But I want to believe that with the economic recession we went through, we've actually dropped from that radar. That said, the continental project is as strong as the members' efforts, the political will behind it, and the efforts, actual implementation of decisions or choices agreed upon at the continental level. Now, for instance, if you see African countries need to trade more with themselves, exchange more with themselves, one question you could as well ask, what are we producing? But by and large, African countries actually even trade more with developed countries more than with themselves, which is an issue anyway. There needs to be some form of comparative advantage and complementarity, so that if I produce, I have this as major resource within my territory, the other country has this, we should be able to exchange. But if we say, for instance, Cote d'Ivoire, major producer, cocoa, where are the industries, major industries? We do have industries, it's not that we don't have absolutely, but where are the major industries that could absorb maybe the volume of cocoa produced by Cote d'Ivoire within Nigeria? That's at the level of trade. Now, the other issues have to do with, competition among the African countries themselves. Sometimes recognition, sometimes because of the issue of insufficient capacity. Then there is the external dimension or the external hand, as usual. You have the former colonial powers also interfering. Most times the finger tends to point at the French-speaking countries especially, who have to make reference to whatever they want to do collectively. Where does France stand on such issues before they will actually take a major decision? So you tend to have some countries, taking a position that is different from what the others do. Well, it's actually an issue that you always dialogue, give and take, eventually you reach a position. But the amount of time we spend sometimes bickering over issues which are more or less given in the interest of the entire continent, we waste so much time. I give you an example. There was very long debate on the need to search for an alternative to funding the African Union, of which a lot of money dependence was on the developed countries, particularly EU, for peacekeeping operations, etc. In which case, what we contribute, which major countries like Nigeria, Algeria, Egypt, South Africa, and Libya before the death of Gaddafi were said to be major funders. Okay, now those countries were funding, but the money was not even going. I mean, it was not major part of the operational, cost. But when you come to or just covering some bit of the administration, when it comes to some of these other engagements, the resources were not much. You understand? So we have to be depending on this. Now, external powers. Looking inwards now, what do we do to be able to address this? When the issue was brought on the platform of the African Union, it took such a long time before African countries would eventually agree some form of understanding that, okay, let's see how we actually fund internally with some bit of contributions, tariffs, 0.02% there to be able to fund our own continental project. If not, some will even tell you that even one African country could actually build the African Union Secretariat. Did we really need China to come and build the external secretariat? I mean, our own continental secretariat for us. 2-3 African countries can actually do that, where there is the will. So the issue of actually willpower also is another issue. As I said, we spend a lot of time, debating or contending on issues which we could actually reach agreement on much earlier. And so that slows down the continental project. So that is at the level of the external, hand and play. But basically, to me, the countries more or less they tend to look in the direction of their national interest first before the continental level interest. By the time we are through with that, we've lost some time, and the victim is our future as a whole, as a continent.
Why do you think Nigeria has not signed up to the Africa Continental Free Trade area?
Nigeria has not, or at least we've been told by government spokesmen that Nigeria has not signed because we want to ensure that Nigeria's interest is well protected before we sign, which is actually right. Because it's another thing to rush and go and sign. Now, when it comes to the issue of the level of implementation, we begin to suffer some form of hiccups. I think it's better. Somebody even said that if we look deep, at the level of the EU, whenever they have something of this nature, it takes them a longer time to negotiate it before they now begin to do the implementation. So by the time that's for countries to sign and append their signature to it, by the time they now start implementation testing, on our own part, we rush to sign, and when it comes to the level of implementation, the implementation is very, very slow. Because perhaps we never studied in depth the implications, what it actually portends for countries before actually putting our pen on paper. Beyond the level of negotiations and what ministers or the trade negotiators have told their head of state and have actually assured themselves it will be. What of when it comes to the level of the major stakeholders that will be the beneficiaries or who will be affected by the African Continental Free Trade Area? Now, that said, the African Continental Free Trade Area on its own is a noble project, a good initiative at the level of the African Union. And it's part and parcel of our historical march towards achieving the African Economic Community. The treaty which was signed here in Lagos, springing from previous initiatives also, the Lagos Plan of Action. These foundations were laid. There was an understanding that, okay, for us to achieve an African Economic Community, we need to strengthen where they exist, regional economic blocks. Where they don't exist, we effect one. Okay, and then at a certain level, we're expecting that these regional blocks will also merge, okay, forming free trade areas, and eventually, as we progress, we work together. They will actually merge in themselves to level of a custom union, okay. In which case, we will have common tariffs and then common maybe. Laws, etc., that will actually guide certain aspects of our our conduct and our interactions. If, for instance, side by side, the African Continental Free Trade Area was the document on free trade, free movement of person, issue of right of resident, which has actually been in practice in the ECOWAS region already. So that is also being experimented at the level of the African Union. Some countries have signed it. So it's not as if it came out of the blues. It's actually something historical. It's something that African countries have been working on. Now there have been timelines attached to this. So maybe it's because of the timelines that at the level of the African Union they decided to estimate. And this actually came to the fore in 2012 at the level of the African Union, that negotiations need to actually pick up a little push to ensure that we achieve this by 2017. And countries have been negotiating on both tariff, non-tariff areas, issue of intellectual property rights, and so many other areas. Now, this affects countries, whether we like them. It will affect their revenue, it will affect citizens' power, it will affect employment, it will affect industries. Because by the time you say, okay, a free trade area, meaning that after a certain period, goods from one country to the other might have, depending on what agreement has been reached, they should be able to move based on that agreement. Is it absolutely free tariffs, or at least free movement? Is it absolutely maybe some small tariff, depending on which of the items they're talking about? Is it goods, is it services, etc. Now, once that form of agreement is reached, it means all the countries that have signed on to this will have to comply. As I said, the negotiations have been on since 2012, and eventually, at the level of African Union, there was this understanding in March that, look, yes, we've tied this on loose ends, we can go ahead. And so for African countries, we are first to sign. But just when Nigeria was about to take off, even after the Federal Executive Council had given a note that, the president can actually go and sign, some voices were raised. Very critical, very key, important stakeholders. Nigerian Labour Congress, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, some civil societies say that we have not really understood the content and the implications of the African Continental Free Trade. Hence, Nigeria had to wait. It was not only Nigeria, anyway. Some other countries like South Africa actually went for the meeting, but with gave a word that we agree, or rather, we are in support of this, but we need to ensure that they agree with our national laws before we put our pen on paper. In the case of Nigeria, where I actually fought was that while these negotiations was ongoing, what were we doing? We should have done sensitization workshops, a lot of it. We should have actually carried out enlightenment programs, brought these stakeholders on board. I mean broadly, because until recently, a lot of people still didn't even know. And I want to believe that a lot of people still don't know anything about it. As I tell people that it will affect your bread and butter at the end of the day. People will not understand this. It will. And whether we sign or we don't sign, I as a person feel that it will still affect us. And how? If our neighboring countries, for instance, sign onto this, and we are already within the ECOWAS with them, and we have another understanding with them within the ECOWAS, okay, that we should be able to exchange goods under the common external tariff within the ECOWAS. When they bring in hundreds and thousands of bags of rice or tomatoes and dump it, they bring them in, they could just repackage them here, and the bag reads that it's produced here. What do? They find themselves into the border. Even after the Nigeria made a very strong, took a strong position that, look, we are going to do domestic production of rice. We will limit the influx of rice. You and I know that by the time you walk the street, if there's any market nearby, you'll still find some of the rice. Within the markets. How do they get in? You get my point. So, I strongly believe that yes, Nigeria has not yet signed. I want to believe that Nigeria sooner or later will sign, but we need to get all the stakeholders on board. So why Nigeria did not sign? The reason is out. On this, I agree with the government that yes, the consultation needs to be done and thoroughly done, so that we bring all stakeholders who will be affected by this to understand and adjust. meaningfully so that we can collectively reap the benefits. But even so, I feel that it's still not sufficient.
Please. Do you think Nigeria is where it should be in terms of global economy?
We've done much in terms of trying to place the country on the global map. Over the years, we seem to have actually declined. Well, I hear this where perhaps when we had very clear understanding of what our foreign policy direction was, and which featured more in Africa, we put ourselves, in the forefront of anti-colonial struggle, anti-racism, to the extent that we gained so much recognition at that time within the Southern African countries. Common knowledge, even with people in secondary school, like, oh, we're a frontline state. Well, we actually devoted ourselves to this, and somehow the basic foundation at home was quite lacking, because you need to be developed sufficiently to be able to sustain that kind of recognition externally as well. If you, as a person, always fond of giving outside, and then the people you are giving realize that you are not living fine, you understand, the level of respect will not be the same. And so you have a situation whereby African countries, sometimes even when we take positions, we have a contrary, they have contrary positions, sometimes even more or less working against Nigeria's interest. And so we actually need to be able to get it right at the domestic level, and because this to a very large extent has implications on the external level as well. To me, even by the time you get it right, you don't need to actually always drum that countries should recognize you before they recognize you. They will recognize you. Countries like India, China in recent times don't have to drum that you must recognize us before they will recognize. In fact, they even tell themselves that they are soft powers. They don't want to, place themselves with the other ones, begin to rub shoulders so soon before you get knocked off the radar. But they want to ensure that they build their pillars very strong, build their capacity very strong. Even being nuclear powers, with China even sitting in the UN Security Council, still tell itself it's a soft power. So our own theater within Africa, within West Africa, we need to hold on to it. And so whenever issues that have to do with national power, building our capacity, and getting our governance right, strengthening our economy, which is very, very fundamental. We shouldn't joke with those. So we are not there. Yes, we still offer help every now and then. We still, of course, boost Nigeria's image outside, but we can do much more than that. The domestic foundation is actually the case, not just the external environment, because you are as strong as you are at home.
Thank you very much, and that's our show for today. I've been discussing with Dr. Sharkdam Wapmuk, a senior research fellow and head division of African politics and integration at the Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Thank you, Doctor, for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.